I'm so pleased that you are all here. All one of you, I think it is at the moment, but you know, one is better than nothing. I'm really excited because this month's Tiny Voice Talks book salon is all about authentic representation, something that I am utterly passionate about, and I know that many of you watching are as well. So I'm really excited today because I am joined by two authors, one educator/author and a head teacher, all to talk about authentic representation. So let me bring them in. We're missing one person at the moment, by the way, but they will appear, I have no doubt. So I'm adding Richard O'Neill to the stream, Sharifah Lee to the stream, and AM Dassu to the stream, otherwise known as Az. So welcome everyone.
Hello.
I'm so pleased you're here to join me. I really am. So whilst I go to YouTube and share this on Twitter in the hope that we'll get more people joining us, can you introduce yourselves? So Richard, over you go.
Hello, yeah, my name's Richard O'Neill. I'm a storyteller and an author, and most of my work features my history and culture, that is of Romani and Gypsy people.
Thank you. Sharifah.
I'm Sharifah Lee, head teacher for primary school. I am Richard and Toria's friend, and just before the show, I have decided I am definitely Richard's friend because we've been reading his books at school. I have just read Az's book, which I think is absolutely pertinent to our times and needs to be read by everyone and not just children as well. Passionate about equality, equity, diversity, and definitely inclusion, and totally about acceptance. So that's where I've come from.
Can I just say, you're desperate to be everyone's friend, Sharifah. You're definitely mine. And undoubtedly, by the end of this session, will also be Az's. As just putting it out there, Sharifah and I are desperate to be friends with most people. And then what we do is we're just going to go, oh my gosh, they're my friend. So undoubtedly tomorrow we will enter the school, and alongside saying Richard O'Neill's our friend, we will also say, my goodness, AM Dassu's our friend too. So, Az, for anyone that doesn't know you, who are you?
Hi, I'm Az, and I'm an author and also a director of Inclusive Minds, and I write contemporary non-fiction and fiction children's books as AM Dassu. And Boy Everywhere, which you can see behind me, is my middle grade novel, which is out right now. And through my books, I explore outside political events and how they impact family relationships and friendships. And I'm passionate about representing and voicing perceptions of marginalised communities. Thanks for having me here today.
Oh, so great for you joining us. So Richard, you are the person that chose this month's theme, authentic representation. Can you tell me why?
I can. I'm quite old now, so I first went to school about 54 years ago. So that's a long time. That's over half a century. And right throughout the time I spent in school, from primary school up to secondary school, I never read one book that positively represented my community, my culture. Bearing in mind that my community had been in England for over 500 years. So in all that time, not one book. And then I think since then we've had books that have had us, well, we've been in books since Shakespeare, you know, Shakespeare's time, but we're usually negatively represented. And it's taken this long, you know, we're 50 years down the line until we've got these books that are, and when I say authentic, I don't necessarily mean every book has to be written by the person from that community, but it's incredibly difficult to do a really good positive representation and get authenticity if you haven't been there, done that. You can, you know, any of us can do an internet search, we can do all the Google stuff, but you can't get the minutiae of people's community. You can't get those experiences, and there are things that go beyond. There are things under the surface that you can't get. So it's really important to me that when I read a book about somebody's community, somebody's culture, it is as authentic as possible. And it's taken a long time, I think, before we've got to this stage. And I think we did discuss about, you know, that 50 years it's taken for my community, for my books. But we're talking about, I think there's been an acceleration of this over the last 5 years. And I think some of it has, as often comes from America, where people are saying, well, hang on a minute, you're writing a book about this community. Have you got anything to do with that community? You're getting all the book sales, you're getting all of that, and you don't really represent it. So I think that's coming into UK publishing quicker and quicker all the time, where people are saying, well, hang on a minute, is it really authentic? You know, if we're going to watch something on TV, if we're going to read a book, is it a true representation? Is it a good representation? So that's why I wanted to have the discussion tonight, because I think it's important, because there's nothing worse for me than when somebody writes a book about my community, the publisher send it to me to sign it off as a consultant to that book, and I go, oh my God, oh no, what? Do you know there are 3 different types of traveling people? There's Romani people, you know, there is Roma people, there is Irish traveler people, and you've mixed the whole lot here. And, you know, the best are not good, the worst are appalling. And I just wish people wouldn't do it, or at least, you know, talk to somebody first and say, I'm planning to do this. So that's what I want to avoid, because it's no good for the publisher, it's no good for the author. And I think everybody's culture and community is interesting. So why would you want to write about somebody else's? Why not look at your own? Look inward and look at your community. Every community is fascinating. I honestly do. I spend a lot of time in schools. I think school culture is fascinating. You know, when you're in a staff room and there are certain mugs you can't use and certain seats you can't sit on, and notes left on fridges to say, you know, who stole my pizza, or, you know, who's doing this. Little things that you have to be in it to understand. So, you know, that's what I wanted to have this discussion about tonight, about authenticity, because I think if we don't have the authenticity in books, we're doing our children in school a disservice, those who are outside of, say, my community, and those who are inside my community, we're doing a disservice, because there's nothing worse being a kid in a school and opening a book and going, it mentions the word about my community, but look where it's gone. That's not me. That doesn't represent me. You know, so I mean, you could imagine if I wrote a book about being a woman, you know, and I go, oh yeah, it's all about this and all about that. And then people looking, what the hell is he talking about? You know, I wouldn't have a clue, would I? You know, I could do some research, but it won't be very good. So that's, you know, that's where I'm coming from. That's why I wanted to have this discussion.
So following
I really appreciate it. What I was going to say, I've seen you nodding along madly. So yeah, what are your views on this?
Richard's right. You know, over the last few years, we've had a lot of discussions in the media with the hashtag Oscars So White and the whitewashing of characters in film or TV, and also own voices, which is what Richard's referring to. And the political conversation spurred by the Black Lives Matter movement and findings from research done by Book Trust and CLPE have all made writers look at their own stories and try to offer a more diverse narrative that is not white, straight, cisgendered, non-disabled or neurotypical. And I get it. As writers, we want to provide a mirror so that all children can see themselves in books. But can we respectfully retell experiences we haven't lived through without being inaccurate or appropriating? Now, when I started writing Boy Everywhere, I knew I was taking on a huge responsibility. And it soon became the book I wish I hadn't started writing, because I was desperate to make a difference right away, but I also didn't want to send it out till I was sure it represented Syrians and refugees the way they deserve to be portrayed. And writing outside of your lived experience is a skill that can be learned, like any other aspect of the craft, but it's hard. And to do it well, you need to be passionate about it. I don't think I could personally write about another lived experience again, not for a long time. It is a massive time investment if you want to do it properly. And it was only because I was so passionate about challenging stereotypes about refugees that I was able to invest so much time and energy into Boy Everywhere. And it would, I mean, I think it would be really difficult for me to replicate that for another story that I didn't feel as passionate about. And, you know, as someone who could write own voices myself, I would say it's a lot easier to write own voices, if I'm honest. You know, when writing my forthcoming Big Cat chapter book, I was keen to show both Western and traditional culture. And I based that mother on me. So she serves her son chips. They have a junk drawer full of crisps in their kitchen like us. And later Granny comes in and brings spicy rice and makes samosas in her home because, you know, most people don't eat samosas for breakfast. And this was, it was easy for me to do because I didn't have, it took me 2 days to write the whole story because I didn't have to do any research because I was just writing of my own experience. So I can see the benefits in writing both inside and outside of your experiences. I've done both. But as Richard said, inclusion of various lived experiences can be harmful if not approached properly. And it's not something that an author can just add to their story because they feel like it. You've got to put the work in. You've got to be ready for criticism. You've got to approach it with humility. You've got to be careful not to write about someone's perspective if you really have no understanding or time or desire to learn about it. So like Richard, I get very, very frustrated when I see a publisher taking a box and sending out a book and saying, can you check this over for us? Because they feel that if it's been read once by a person from that community, they've done their bit, they've had it checked. Yeah. And I totally discourage that approach. That is not how you write a story about another community. For me, it's as important as if you were writing about your own family. It's got to be written with great care and attention. It's got to be checked. It's got to be respectful. There are so many stories, and I'll add award-winning stories that have been written about communities where they are shown as victims. They've got to be saved, even if that isn't their reality. And we should want fiction to be responsible and ensure our stories are accurate. We should ensure we do this by giving a voice and agency to marginalized communities. For example, Black Panther or Moana, they shifted the mainstream lens and they showed what can happen when a marginalized person gets full agency, that their culture can be celebrated without stereotypes. And
I think there as a
can I just stop? Can I stop you, Richard? Because I've got Ian Eagleton waiting to come in.
Fabulous.
So I want to bring Ian on with us, everyone. So welcome, Ian.
Hi, Ian.
Hello. I'm so sorry, everyone. We're currently going through the adoption process, and we've got our transitions at the moment with our little one. So we are driving backwards and forwards for where we need to be. But I'm here.
Well, we're grateful you're here now, Ian. So for everyone watching, we've done our introduction, so we'll have you introduce yourself. Who is Ian Eagleton?
Question. I've been a primary school teacher for 13 years. And I am now a full-time resource writer for The Literacy Shed and Authorify. And I've just released my first picture book, Nen and the Lonely Fisherman, which is illustrated by James Mayhew and published by Owlet Press. So it's been a bit of a whirlwind at the moment. Everything came along at once for us, like the book publishing and the adoption and everything. So, but that's me at the moment, tired, frazzled, and ready to go still.
Well, I will aim the next question over to Sharifah, who's been waiting there patiently, because Sharifah, we've listened to two authors talking about the importance of representation in books and it being authentic. I want to talk about classrooms and schools. You've been teaching for a little while now. Was your experience different 5 years ago with regards to the books that we had in the classrooms, and how has it changed? How has it changed for you?
I think as a practitioner, an educator, as a leader as well, it's not just changed in the last 10 years or 5 years, it's also changed in the last year. I mean, if you look at the number of diverse authors out there who, and we're going to come back to that, authentic authors as well, and authors which, as said, with a passion for the storytelling, but not just about storytelling, but I'm going to pick up on something that Richard said, because Richard was talking from a point of view of the author, that the author needs to be authentic. If you're talking about telling a story about a community, either you need to live, have experience at community, or you have a really deep understanding about the community, whatever the community is, that you have not only empathy, not only compassion. I love the word humility as well, because you are channeling other people's stories. You are a channel. And I think you need to take that and understand that you are their voices for them. And I think, as we're saying as well in her story, and I've read it, and oh my goodness me, it didn't just touch my heart, it blew my mind completely. And I'm going to tell you a story, and they're two stories, and they're both related. One about a gypsy traveler community that I served. The school that I served had a massive, I mean, they were not mobile anymore, they were pretty static. We served a lot of children that came to the school, and even then there was a stigma about that community that I served, and I could see that, and I could see, and these were the names, and I used these names in my assembly on Monday yesterday when I read Richard's book. You know, I remember Jimmy, and I remember Connor, and I remember their parents, and I remember how they were always, they looked marginalized, they felt marginalized, and there were no stories about them, no stories that they could tell others, that I could help them by being the channel for their voices as well. And where in the same school, and this is about 10 years ago, where we had an influx of refugees from the Middle East, and it was the aftermath of the Iraqi war, basically. And there were a lot of families, and there was a particular family, a dad with 2 children, and they came to the school not understanding a word of English. Right? They had been through the horrors, some of the horrors that Az has described, they've been through those horrors. And I had a meeting with Father one day because I was trying to understand their story. And I felt privileged. There was a sense of humility, but there was also a sense of horror because he described how he was tortured in an Iraqi prison, and how his children saw, you know, the scars that were left behind, the journey that they had to make to come here with absolutely nothing. He was a doctor, by the way, and that is why your story resonated as well. He was a doctor, and they had to leave absolutely everything. And there was a deep sadness in him, but also a deep commitment that life is going to be better from now on. It has to be, because they have no choice anymore. There isn't a choice. There's not about choices, you know. But who tells those stories? I was privileged to hold this story, but who will listen? But it's only through books such as yours, Richard, and yours, Az, and yours as well, Ian. People will start to listen, and it must be through educating our children who will then educate their parents, and it will seep into the community as well. And that's why totally this evening is key, and it's got to go out there further and wider out as well. And I'm just privileged to be here, by the way. You are all my friends. I'm going to come back to that theme. You are all my friends. I'm going to start name dropping again.
Thanks, Sharifah. Ian, you've said that you have been an educator for many years. Is your experience the same as Sharifah's, in that actually there was a significant lack of representation, you know, before, and actually there's a significant change now?
That's a really difficult one, because if I'm being completely honest, as a teacher, until I suppose the last 5 years of my career, it wasn't something I even really thought about. I know that sounds terrible.
No, it doesn't. And I think you're spot on. And I think that's the issue. I don't think it was something that was thought about. And actually, this is why, as Sharifah said, this sort of discussion is absolutely vital, because these books need to be on our classroom shelves. But I wonder how many people are thinking about it. Do carry on, Ian. Sorry, you just, yeah.
No, I think that, I mean, I've taught in lots of different areas where I live, and taught many different children, and I've always felt that their stories and their lives were incredibly important, and that writing about their lives was incredibly important, and giving them time and space to tell their stories was important. But I wouldn't have called myself what Teresa Kremen calls a reader teacher and a teacher reader. I was a very busy, stressed type teacher who didn't really have time to read books, who had paperwork to do and data to input and things like that. And it wasn't, I think, for a lot of us, the CLPE study about BAME characters in children's picture books and stories was a real sort of eye-opener. But I also think, for me, when I went part-time, it allowed me to find different stories and take the time to read other people's stories, time that I don't think I have. And that's something that teachers, because I've been an English leader and coordinator for a lot of my career, and that's one of the things that teachers often say to me is, these books are absolutely lovely, but I don't have the time to read them. When am I meant to read them and explore them? And it's a really difficult one. You have to create a culture in school you know, I used to, a lot of my leadership time for staff meeting, I'd just say, here are loads of lovely books that I found, everyone. You've got the next hour and a half just to read them and chat about them and experience them, and that's it. Because finding time to read these stories is really important. And I'm obviously not speaking for all teachers, but it was something certainly at the beginning of my career that I found very difficult. I wasn't knowledgeable about it all. So I suppose I can't say if I knew exactly about all the different stories that there were in the world at the beginning of my career. So that's a tricky one. And now that I have shelves of books that I love reading, and I, it's something that's very important to me, but I often wonder what would have happened if I hadn't found social media, Twitter, and I hadn't been able to look at all the fantastic books out there at the moment. Would I have been as knowledgeable as I am now? So that was a load of waffle. You can tell we've been up since 6 o'clock this morning and changed lots of dirty nappies.
That was great, Ian. That was great, because it's all about different perspectives, isn't it? And I think that was fabulous. And just going back to what Toria was saying about this 5-year thing, because it resonates with me, because my first picture book came out 5 years ago, and were the first ones of their kind, and pretty much still are. And we talk about the CLPE, which is fabulous, but I think about 3 years ago, and I think even probably this year would be the same, the only shall we say, international published picture books, particularly about Romani Gypsy characters, culture, community, whatever, were my books. And whilst on the one hand you're thinking, you think, hang on a minute, that's not a good accolade to have, really, because I would like to see many, many more. I'd like to see it become a genre, not just a unicorn. But I think it has changed over that last 5 years. I've seen people, and a couple of years ago we started the Diverse Book Week, and we keep finding more and more people coming through. And I think also what we're getting is, I don't know if you're finding this, but when I'm finding, we talked a little bit earlier before you were here, Ian, about authentic representation, authentic authorship, perhaps, of communities, of cultures, whatever we want to call them. And I think we're getting better at that. And, the books I see now very often are not just, this is about a culture we haven't looked at, that they're really good quality. And I think that's a really good thing, because I think the people who think, I'll just bung a gay character in there because it's interesting, I'll just bung a character from a different country in, or I'll bung a gypsy character in because we haven't had a gypsy friend for this girl, or whatever, that's becoming less. And I think that's a really good thing. So not only are we getting more diverse books, I think they are really good quality, in my opinion.
I just want to butt in there, actually, Richard, because that's a conversation that I've had with my head teacher recently, where I was saying we need a lot more in the way of diversity and representation on our bookshelves. And he said, but are they good? Because we need to have high quality books. And I'm like, they are amazing. But I think there's an anxiety around that. As I'm going to come to you, because I know that when it came to Boy Everywhere, it didn't just sort of flow out of your pen quickly. There was an awful lot of research that went into it so that you could get it right, so that it was high quality text.
Oh, gosh. I mean, the actual story came to me quite quickly, but it took me over 5 years to get it to what you're reading today.
Wow.
Not every day, obviously, but yeah, I mean, this is the book of my heart. I will never, ever write a book like this ever again, even when it's my own experience. I could never, because I was not writing about me. I was writing about people that had suffered great challenges. And so for me, I just couldn't let this story go. I just believed in it so much. And I thought, I need to get this out there. Because this is going to make a difference. And every Syrian or every refugee I spoke to, they wanted me to get this out there. And so that fueled my passion to stick with it. But it was basically inspired, it was in 2015. The war had been raging in Syria for 5 years already. The description in the news was really hateful and unkind of refugees. You'll remember that Nigel Farage poster that we all saw. And the world was basically struggling to help Syrians. And I was sitting in my comfortable living room, watching countless news broadcasts about the arrival of refugees to Europe. And it was one particular interview which showed refugees in a muddy camp wearing Nike trainers, holding smartphones. And they were talking about what they left behind. And in that moment, it was a light bulb moment. I realized that if we were to protest against the government and our government was to attack us, and our country then, we just, destroyed ourselves in civil war because we started fighting each other. I would be that refugee on my screen. I would be the person with Nike trainers, an iPhone with no home to go back to. And it was this realization that their lives were similar to ours. And it was due to media reports at the time. Many people were assuming that refugees were poor, they were uneducated, that they wanted to come to Europe because they'd have a better life. But the more Syrian people I met, the more research I did, I realized that if it weren't for the war, most Syrians would never have left. The media's got a lot to answer for. For years, we've been only shown grey rubble on the news or refugees in rubber dinghies. And it's so easy to forget that Syria is one of the oldest civilizations. And there's a perception that people in the Middle East live in a distant desert country in tents. They only wear robes. They don't speak English. And, not many people knew that they've got a 5 seasons hotel. It's one of the things that I lead with in my school workshops. I'll show pictures to the kids, and I'll show them a Costa coffee shop. I'll show them a mall, and I'll ask them what they think it is, and they'll say to me, "Oh, that's Debenhams. That's the beauty department in Debenhams. That's a Costa coffee shop." And I'll say, "Where do you think these pictures were taken?" And they'll say, "Birmingham, London, New York, Australia." And then I'll tell them that actually all of these pictures were taken in Damascus in Syria, and their jaws drop. And I'll say, "I know, mine did too," when I was doing the research, because the focus on refugees hasn't been the full story. They haven't given the media hasn't given us the full story. The focus has been on them not knowing English, wanting our jobs, taking our space. So I wanted to show that actually they do know English. Syrians have English-speaking schools. My friend Ahmed's a refugee. He studied English literature at university. He's read Chaucer, one of the greatest English writers, apparently, and I haven't. I wanted to show readers what it feels like to have it all and then lose it. But in terms of research, I can honestly say I haven't cried about anything as much as I have about Boy Everywhere, because I wanted to do justice to everything refugees and Syrians have told me to share. I wanted to represent them holistically as real people you could imagine meeting. And the research was intense. I'd been supporting refugees for years, by raising money for food and aid. But I knew that wasn't enough. I wanted to do something long-lasting. To celebrate their culture, their backgrounds. So even though I started looking at footage, as Richard was saying earlier, you can't write a book by looking at footage or reading a few books. You've got to really meet those people. You've got to know that community. And obviously the key reason for writing Boy Everywhere was to challenge stereotypes. So I asked questions, I listened, and I tried to understand what felt unfair to Syrian refugees and the way they were represented in books and the media. I connected with them. I personally supported families in my own community. I traveled to London, which is over 100 miles away from where I am, to meet refugees. I connected with them via Twitter. I had the book read by friends in Damascus who are from Damascus in the UK, but also friends in Damascus still living there. My dear friend Majida, who lives in Damascus, who the teacher in chapter 1 is named after, she spent an unbelievable amount of time fact-checking my book and answering my questions, sending me pictures of her neighborhood on WhatsApp. And, I was panicking so much, even when the proofs had gone out, before it was to be published, I was rereading it and I was WhatsApping my friend and saying, "Can you just send me a picture again of your garden? I want to double check this detail." Because I just really needed to make sure that I'd done this right. And it was really heartening to hear her son, who was 12, he read it, her students read it, and for them to say that, this is what we want the world to know, and thank you for doing this. But honestly, This book is
Sorry for interrupting us, but there's a couple of things there that you said I think that are really worth flagging up again. Is that you talked about the richness, and I think that's what, and I'll get Ian's perspective on this as well, because I think talk about the richness of an experience or of a community, and the media doesn't do that. It's very flat. The media goes, these people are this and they do that, and here's the photographic evidence to prove all of those people do that because we filmed a few.
Yeah.
And you also talked about feeling and it being difficult, and I honestly, you know, and I'm talking as a northern bloke here, when you're writing a story, I believe when I'm writing my stories, if I don't feel like I'm welling up sometimes, right, if I don't feel the emotion, it's probably a rubbish story. Every picture book that I've done, I'm feeling it.
Yeah.
And if I'm not feeling it, it's just going in the bin, because it's just not right. We're not conveying. What about you, Ian, with that? You know, this picture book of yours, which is fabulous, by the way. I mean, that feel of it.
Yeah, it's something that a few points I suppose that I can pick up. It's something that I didn't realise be emotional as emotional as it has been. We, for Nen, James, Sam, and I all identify as gay, and we felt a huge responsibility to get it right, and it was we all felt that it had to be absolutely perfect before it went out and before this story was told, and it was very, very, very emotional. And there was there have been lots and lots of tears from it and due to it, and we've had lovely messages from people saying, your story has allowed my nephew to come out to me, and things like that. And the other thing that I find really interesting is I actually started writing, I'm 36 now, I actually started writing picture books when I was 28 and still teaching in class. And I had stories written with 2 gay dads, and I got an email back from a publisher saying, this is possibly one of the best manuscripts we've ever read, but we cannot place it. And I was like, oh, that's really odd, because I knew nothing about the publishing world. And I was like, I just don't understand. And so for about 5-6 years, that's what I've got from publishers saying, this is a really, really good story, but we can't place this. Have you thought about changing this aspect of it? And I'm like, this aspect is my life and the most important part of it. So no, I'm not changing it. And this is our story. And and what we're also very aware of with Nen is that we are quite privileged in terms of we are white middle class gay men, and so within our community we're very aware of the fact that there are other people that are not as privileged as us. And so someone on Twitter, and it stuck with me from the very beginning, someone on Twitter said, oh, we're looking for LGBT picture books. And someone tagged me and said, oh, Ian Eagleton does LGBT picture books. And first of all, I thought, well, do I really do that? Because my story has 2 gay men in it. So I haven't included bisexual or trans or lesbian characters in it. So I don't think I can say that. I need to label myself as that. And someone else also tagged me and said, can you write a story with non-binary characters in it? Because there isn't anything out there. And I said to them, do you know what? I don't think I can, because I'm not non-binary and it's not something I know enough about. But go and check out these guys, because these guys are non-binary and they're writing really great things. But I didn't feel like it was more my story to tell. And so, yeah, for something that's, you know, you think, oh, I'm writing this lovely magical picture book, but there's a lot with it that you have. And so I think, yes, absolutely, you feel that sense of responsibility and that emotion and connection with it. And I was very aware of how gay men have been represented in the media, with the AIDS crisis and the terrible headlines we've had written about us. And we struck on the idea of there being a sea storm in the story, and I had written that originally, and the publisher said, why don't we have it so that Nen's father causes the sea storm? And I said, yeah, that would be great, that would really add to the drama of it. But I said, but I don't know why Nen's father would cause a sea storm. And we talked about, was Nen's father sort of homophobic, and would he be disapproving of their relationship? And I said to my publisher, no, I can't do that. That's been done so many times. There are so many stories about gay people coming out and being let down by society and their parents. We have to give hope in this story. And so we came upon the ecological theme, and that Nen's father was disapproving of humans because of their treatment of the ocean.
Yeah. And I think you did that so well. You really did. I mean, I read it to my class. So I've got year 4, Ian, and the discussions that ensued following on from it, really, really fascinating around it, you know. And actually, it's a really powerful book. And, you know, what was interesting was that they could see how there were similarities to The Little Mermaid, and they could also see how it broke with stereotypes, because actually it wasn't about, you know, that, you know, the mermaid was a merman and everything else. Really, really powerful book, which I thought, you know, dealt so well. And I was so pleased that the father was not coming down and was not homophobic, but it was actually to do with the environment. It really pleased me that didn't come into the book. Now, before we start the next part, we're going to listen to Rich Simpson recommend some books, because otherwise he is watching this at the moment. Otherwise he'll start getting upset. He has already said that this amused me, this one. Oh, wow. Has Ian written a picture book? I haven't seen that anywhere recently. So he's sitting there watching this, making very sarcastic comments, everyone. So he is. So I do feel that we should pop onto that. And then, Sharifah, when we come back, I want to hear from the educator next. So I'm just going to pop Richard on. I'm going to remove the rest of you. Now, I've got to figure out how to do this. This is always exciting when I do this. Oh, look, I was right. There we go.
Hello and welcome to my recommendations here on the Book Salon. I'm going to try and stick to 5 minutes, but I never quite manage it any week, so I probably won't be any different this week. So let's get on with it and get started. First book to recommend, Just Like Me, by Louise Gooding. This is published by Studio Press Books and came out recently. What it is one of those books with sort of mini biographies of a range of different characters. Some more well-known than others. There's Usain Bolt in there, Stephen Hawking, and a couple of others. And they're all neurologically or physically diverse people who break stereotypes. And it's just a lovely book. There's something in here for everybody, whether you're interested in sports people or inventors or musicians. Really, really interesting. I've used this with quite a lot of success in my class, where children have read it and then gone on and done a bit of further research about the characters. There's useful information about what the stereotype is, what the condition that these people might have is, and what is done about that. So spinal muscular atrophy here, and a character called Ralph Braun, quotes from the people involved, their achievements, and just a really, really interesting book for children to use. Second book, I'm not sure if I've recommended this one before or not, but I'll do it again. It's The Good Hawk by Joseph Elliott, and this is a brilliant book. It's sort of fantasy, fiction, adventure, lots of diversity in here. one of the main characters, Jamie, has questions around his sexuality and feelings for another character. There's a girl called Agatha, who's one of the main characters, who has learning disabilities in here as well. But they're both brilliant characters, and they overcome all of that, overcome everybody's expectations and everybody's sort of doubts to become the heroes of the story. Brilliant, brilliant story. And if you love it, there's a sequel and a third in the series on the way later this year as well. Fantastic book. Haven't featured poetry before, but again, another poet that I absolutely love, Benjamin Zephaniah, whether it's his books or his poetry, a real character. And what I like about this book is that it's the poems next to facts about the characters and the people involved as well. So it's called We Are Britain, and it's poems about 13 children from all around Britain in a range of cultural backgrounds, with facts about them, their lives, their beliefs, where they're from. And it just works really, really well because it's a mixture of all those different things. It's fact, it's fiction, it's poetry as well. It's quotes from the children, and the children will recognise places, place names, can do a bit of investigation about the people and the places that are mentioned in here as well. So another really useful classroom book. I really loved this book recently. It's called Two Small Tola and the Three Fine Girls. It's about a girl called Tola who lives in Lagos in Nigeria. And what I really liked was the fact that they live in a big city and there's not the stereotypes of mud huts and desert in Africa. They live in a big city, it's busy. Her brother works in a car fixing garage. So it sort of breaks a lot of stereotypical views that you think. There's a few books that tend to get pulled out all the time when you're teaching topics about Africa or life in Africa. And this really, really breaks them. She doesn't have an easy life. She has a tricky time. She lives with her granny, who's one of the fiercest but funniest characters I think I've met in a long time in the storybook. So really, really enjoyed that. And she might be small, but she's mighty. So she breaks down lots of stereotypes here as well, Tola. So she works in the market, she sells things, she helps out with various problems. And there's sort of 2 or 3 small short stories in here, which are really, really nice. And there's a bit of a series in there as well, so you can read other books with Tola as the main character. I really like this series from Pushkin Press. It's called True Adventures. What they've done is looked at historical events and looked at the representation in those events, how those events are usually told and from what viewpoint. And they've reassessed it and looked at other characters that might be involved who are sort of secondary, or have always been seen to be secondary, but actually just as valid a part in the whole proceedings as everybody else. So it tells the story from their point of view. This one's about, I thought it was quite timely with it being D-Day and the celebrations this week. This one's called The Fog of War, and it's about a nurse called Martha Gellhorn, who's a war correspondent, a journalist, and she disguises herself as a man to get involved in the D-Day landing so she can report, and it's about her struggle to overcome being accepted as a female in that a very man's world at those times as well. The only woman to set foot on the Normandy beaches on D-Day, and the story told from her point of view. So another really, really great story, that one, and a whole series in that as well that I would highly recommend. I know I'm nearly over my 5 minutes, but I'm going to do another one anyway. This book I've seen recently, or just received recently. It's called The Garden of Inside Outside from a beautiful book publisher called Book Island Books. And this is the story of the daughter of the Italian ambassador to Iran, and she isn't allowed out of the building, isn't supposed to play outside the embassy gardens, but she does, and she makes friends with a local boy, and his name is Masood, and he climbs over the wall, he makes friends with Chiara. They don't speak the same language, they invent their own language, but it's just a lovely story about overcoming those barriers that people set for us, and about friendship and hope in a very difficult setting actually as well. So another lovely book, and I know I've gone over my time, and I'm really, really sorry. I'll stop recommending now. I hope you enjoy those. Enjoy listening to the rest of the show. Thank you.
He really is badly behaved at keeping to time. I've just got to say, every single month, I'm really clear about how much time he has. Ignores it every time, really badly behaved. But actually, some great recommendations there. So, Sharifah, I promise that I come to you after Rich. And what I want to ask you is, as a head teacher, how have you ensured that representation is occurring in your school more and more? Because I think it's great that we're talking about these books. It's wonderful. It's great that the books are out there. But how can teachers and head teachers do what you're doing?
I think number one, that you are committed to this and it's part of the ethos of your school as well. Ian said something about ensuring that our educators and teachers have the time to read these books, because I think you can only start talking about it when you've read it yourself, and that you are committed as well to having representation of diverse books in your school. We're very clear in terms of our culture of our school. We're very clear about the community we serve. We're also very clear about our mission. And our mission is to educate our children to understand that there are stories of people all around us. The world doesn't belong to us. We belong to the world, and all of us are one. We're all human beings, and it's exposing not only the children, but the teachers as well to all these myriad of stories. And I'm so pleased, because I was trying to write, some notes here about some of the books 10 years ago when my own children were growing up. In fact, further on, 15 years ago, it was like a needle in a haystack trying to find books that represented different communities. I mean, my own children, they are of mixed race. There were no books about them, of course not. I did find those few, and they were usually on Storytime, the BBC, and I'd make sure that I get it and read it to them as well. We had books for adults. We had traditional books, South Asian, from all the different cultures in Africa, but you couldn't really find children's books, could you? You couldn't. That was the one that was the missing bit in school, And when we talked about 5 years ago, we talked about the books in our school. We talked more about genres, about traditional tales, about fiction, non-fiction, adventure, whatever it is, fantasy. But we weren't really thinking about people's voices. We weren't really understanding the communities we're serving, not only local community, but the global community that we all serve as schools and educators as well. So I think it's about being really aware and making sure that you know who you are as a school and what your mission is as well, and making sure that everyone in school comes on board with this, not only the teachers, the children, but also the families that belong to your community.
Absolutely. As I want to come to you, because prior to going live, we were discussing something that I thought was really interesting, which was your name, because I've only ever known you as A.M. Dassu. That was it. And wasn't sure why, but you actually explained to me. So can you explain to me again in front of viewers why that was the case?
Well, it's an unfortunate fact that boys don't always connect with books with female main characters. In fact, they don't even want to pick them up. So I wanted to write a book which would be relatable to all children, male, female, non-binary. You could simply relate to a boy who had lives like theirs and had to adapt to losing it. But I also chose to use my initials because I'd read that J.K. Rowling was asked to use hers because boys would be less likely to want to read a book by Joanne Rowling. And it's really unfortunate because I've seen it with my own boys. I mean, they are feminists. They are so supportive of women, yet they still have changed so much as they've gotten older, and they will resist any book with a female lead or a female name. They'll make assumptions, and it really frustrates me, but it is what it is. And it's becoming so much harder to keep them connected to stories and finish them when they do read, because obviously they've got so many more distractions as you get older. They have devices that they use for homework, etc. They chat to their friends. So for that reason, any little thing that I could do to make sure that boys would read my book. And one of my friends, son's friends, picked up Boy Everywhere, and he's a reluctant reader. and he's also dyslexic, and he was engrossed because there was mention of a bombing on page 1 apparently. So it was important for me to really engage young male readers as well as girls, because girls, they don't discriminate as much, unfortunately. Well,
really, I think really
Toria,
important.
Sorry.
Yes, can I just read Louise Gooding's comment, because it was linked to what she said. My daughter's listening in and said we all have the same roots. We are all part of the same tree, even though we may be on different branches. And I thought that was really profound.
Absolutely.
So yay,
Absolutely
Louise
right.
Gooding's daughter.
Yes, Louise's daughter. Well said. Just something that Ian was saying about, we talk again about this authenticity.
Yeah.
And I'm very fortunate with my publisher. We have a really good relationship in that, and I've stayed with my publisher even though I've had other offers, because they allow me the artistic freedom, and it's more of a partnership now, which is great, but what you said there, Ian, about a publisher or someone saying, could we perhaps change this, could we perhaps do that, and you said no, because again, authenticity. And it sounds strange sometimes when we're talking about, picture books or little kids books, whatever some people might call them, in that we want them to have integrity. We want the integrity of the character, of the story to come through. And, some things aren't for negotiation, but I do wonder with some people who are fairly new to publishing, and I was, I guess I was older at the time when mine came out, and I wanted my stories to be authentic. That was the end of it. Otherwise, I wouldn't bother. But I just wonder when somebody's very keen to get published and somebody says, it's a good story, but, it's a bit too gypsy, it's a bit too gay, it's a bit too this, it's a bit too that. I wonder how many people actually do bend and say, okay, I'll change it.
I picked up on it. So the thing is, unless you're from a community or you can relate to things within a community, you're not going to pick up on nuances. You're just not going to. And I read quite a few books recently, which are by diverse authors, and they could be so much stronger. They've been rushed through. The author hasn't been challenged, because every single one of us has biases and stereotypes. It doesn't matter if you've suffered racism or sexism, you will have biases, and they can come through in writing. And what I've noticed in the American market and the UK market, and Richard was alluding to this, it's very different. The editing is so much sharper because they are angrier, they shout a lot more, and they really do discuss these issues. They have been doing for years. We are so behind. In fact, we're so behind, as Richard was saying, we're talking about own voices now, and now the US is leaving the hashtag own voices because it's damaging to authors who have to explain why they're writing a book. They have to come out, or for example, for me, one of the things that I had to do was explain the intersectionality in my book. And I'm lucky, I'm privileged enough to have a lot of experiences that I've written about. I'm not a refugee, obviously, and I haven't lived in Damascus. Those two, I haven't, but my family comes from, we have a privilege to poverty story in our family. My mum came here educated, and she had to work in a factory sewing garments, which was a massive shock to her. So there were a lot of, there are also other personal things that I don't like to talk about, but there has also been a drowning in our family. So these are the sorts of things that I had felt forced to talk about. And it was really upsetting for me because I'm a private person. I don't like to talk about myself. I talk about books, other people's books. I don't talk about my life, you'll notice, on Twitter or anywhere. And I don't think that authors should feel forced to. And the people that I engaged with, the people that I connected with, the people that I spoke to, they could sense that I understood their pain. They could see that I could relate. They could see that I'd already understood what they'd experienced before I'd even met them. And I didn't need to explain that to them, but for some people, I felt like I had to. So in terms of own voices in America and the editing in America, I mean, the questions that I was asked, I was challenged. Editors don't tell you what to write. They'll ask questions, and the questions were brilliant. Like, she really asked me, one of the questions she said was, I had a guard with, I don't know if any of you have read the proof, but you probably have. The guard had dreadlocks. Now in the UK we use that term quite happily. In the US it is absolutely, you know, demeaning and not allowed. So she said, can you use another term? So I changed dreadlocks to just braids. The guard then had braids. But you know, these are the sorts of conversations that people are having there that we are just so behind on. And in terms of choosing books, I think we have a responsibility. So yes, it's great that you're seeing diverse books, fantastic, but we really do still need to read them and try to understand if they are challenging stereotypes. Are they damaging to the communities that they are writing about? There are still lots of people writing books about other communities and harmful tropes. So I would advise that as readers, as teachers, when you're selecting culturally diverse books, try and be aware of harmful tropes in books.
Can we just go to, because I think we're running out of time now. Can we just go to Ian, because I was interested in why you stood your ground.
Oh yeah.
And you didn't want that, you know, that usual trope, because it's something that, so I'm working with a group of GRT LGBTQI plus, this big focus group, and they were saying, you know, we talk about story and creating a story, GRT, and they were saying, you know, it can't be this, it can't be that, it can't be this, it can't be that. Can it be ordinary? We want it to be ordinary. We don't want to go down that, you know, not everybody, we've seen it all before, and most of our lives aren't like that. So what was it about you that you sort of, when that was mentioned that, you know, the dad is homophobic, what was it about that made you stand your ground? Obviously it worked, what your true vision was.
There were a few things. So I'd shown the manuscript to James Mayhew already, and he said, you know, editors will want to change parts of it, and he said, make sure you decide which parts are non-negotiable. He said there are some things in there, he said, that it might not work and they might need to change this or this, and he said, but you need to decide what is non-negotiable in your story. And that was because when I came out, my parents were very accepting of me, and I said to my publisher, I want to honour the response that my parents gave me, and if I didn't do that, I would feel like a bit of a fraud. I would feel awful if my parents read the book and thought, oh, my life, were we not supportive of Ian? So I was very aware that it had to sort of, when you write a book like this, and as probably feels the same as well, you feel like you want to honour and respect, but also celebrate your community, and not just, you know, the LGBT community has had such a negative press, and you know, when I was a teenager, the only stories that I really knew were about gay people that came out and had terrible lives, or gay people that got AIDS and everything went wrong for them and it was a terrible time, and you know, everything was awful, and that was what I grew up on, and a lot of us feel a great deal of shame about ourselves because we only heard stories about families that let us down, or people that didn't accept us, or parents that threw us out of our houses, and that was the kind of stories that I knew about. So I felt a responsibility, I suppose, to young children who are struggling perhaps with their sexuality like I was from about 10 and 11, and I felt like I wanted to just pass on something hopeful that celebrated our lives. So, and I probably, luckily my editor at Owlet Press, Sam, is absolutely amazing, and he was like, okay, that's fine, Ian, I just wanted you to explore whether or not that was something that you could look into. And I was like, no, everyone, you know, everyone's heard the story about parents throwing out their gay sons and disapproving of them. We need to start, and you have to be able to see a change, don't you? You have to actually be able to see it and read about it for you to envisage it. There's this, there's a lovely quote about books, and this is I suppose the main thing for me that stuck with me. There's a quote about books being weapons for the weak, and giving us models of change, models of hope and change, so that children can see what the world could and should look like, rather than what the world does look like. So that's what I was thinking of. Maybe I have loftier heights than I should have.
No, I think it's spot on.
Do you know what, Ian? I just got to say this. What you said there was absolutely beautiful. And there's the word, all that lovely stuff there, but there's a word I picked out there, and the word is honour. You wanted to honour your parents. And that, I think, you've nailed it with that, because I think that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to honour the stories. We're trying to honour the people. And I think people maybe who come in and just rip off our communities, our feelings, our thoughts, whatever, are actually dishonouring it in a way. But I think what you said there, that is just that sums up the night beautifully for me. It really does. To honour. Wonderful. Yeah.
And on that note, we do have to end, people, because believe it or not, we are at the end of time. But it leads us beautifully, actually, something you said, Ian, leads us beautifully into next month's talk, which is all about stereotypes. And I think it's about smashing those stereotypes, which all of you are ensuring that you are doing, and which we need to continue doing in our classrooms. And I think that's so key. Thank you so much, Richard, Sharifah, Ian and Az, for coming on and joining me for a Tiny Voice Talks book salon. And do you know what? We could have gone on for hours and hours and hours. We really could. So thank you so much to you. Thank you so much to everyone watching. As always, Hazel Pinner has been phenomenal in updating our wonderful Padlet. So she's been putting all of the recommendations on there. You're just amazing, Hazel. We love you. Rich Simpson, we appreciate your recommendations, even if you do go over time. Thank you so much to all of you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, and thank you for all your comments. I'm going to go and cry, actually. Thank you so much. Lovely reading them.
Right, we're going to do an official wave, everyone. Bye.